The meek shall inherit the earth. Turn the other cheek. You know, the word meek gets interpreted many different ways. Some people interpret it as afraid or cowardice. That's not what meek means. Meek means that you don't buy into the aggressor's behavior. Meek means that you choose not to escalate an aggressive stance. Meek means that you deflate the aggression. You know, I recently on another video talked about a man standing right in my face saying horrible things about me and my mother and how I loved him through it and how I loved him out of it. To people on the outside, I might have looked like the meek one. However, I stood my ground, didn't walk away, didn't back away. I stood there, and I did not allow myself to escalate the aggression. I did not allow myself to instigate an issue. I did not allow myself. It's up to me to choose to escalate or not. You know, when I spoke in the corporate world, I had the catchphrase was be an action hero, not a reaction zero. And it's the idea of the reaction zero. A reactive nature to an aggressive stance is a fear foundation. You are sitting in fear because they're yelling at you, and you get mad because they're disrespecting you. What is disrespect? What is disrespect? Disrespect is they're not loving me. Disrespect is the fear of not being loved. Disrespect is the fear of not feeling that feeling of God that we're all here to learn and experience. So when someone's in your face screaming and yelling and hollering at you, being meek deflates their aggression. It deflates their fear. You know, when I walked into the fight between my boss and this same guy, and I said, this is my fault, I was the meek one. I was the one who took on all the stuff. I was the meek one. I wasn't the one yelling and screaming and hollering. I wasn't the one in an aggressive stance. I was the meek one. What happened was the owner gave me much more respect than ever. The employee gave me much more respect than ever. They both made up. The meek inherited the earth. The meekness itself stopped the escalation of aggression. The concept of the meek inheriting the earth is true because the aggressive people who are stuck in fear and want to escalate that fear will burn themselves out. And the meek will inherit the earth. The meek will inherit all of the trappings that are left behind by these aggressive people who are just going to get out of hand. Right? Now, that's not a prediction. I don't believe in prediction because God said, whatever you ask in God's name is granted. I believe 100% we are the creators. Nothing in the future is set. What readers read is potential. At this moment, this is what's being created. Right? And when it comes to pass, they go, oh my God, they were so right. The reality of it is they were right at that moment because that's what the creation was making. That's what the creation was building. They read the potential. And because it's a potential, lots of times it comes to pass. Right? Edgar Cayce, one of the greatest psychics in the world, you know, a lot of his big predictions were supposed to happen by 1998. And they didn't happen that we know of. Right? But the idea is that nothing is set in the future, but the people who will inherit a positive future are the quote-unquote meek, the ones who don't buy into the aggressive nature and the fear and the posturing, the ones who don't elicit fear response or make threats of fear so that somebody who is already an aggressive person will have a threat hanging over their head, because that itself is an escalation. Eventually, if you have something hanging over your head, eventually you're going to have to do something to handle that thing that's hanging over your head. If you have a giant tree out front and you've got a giant limb that goes right over your house and you can see a crack forming up there, you got to go up there and take care of that limb or it's going to crush your house. right? That's how aggressive people look at it. They go, that thing that's looming above me is something to be feared, so I need to deal with that. And so you set a fear out there, and now you're part of the escalation process. You're part of that fear response by not buying into and living into that experience. My son, when he was a young boy, was bullied in school. And the one thing that we taught him was, do not react. Do not. If you react and you have a big explosion, he would get upset and have temper tantrums, and get very upset. Well, that's what the bullies wanted. They wanted that reactive response. They wanted that thing to make them feel powerful, right? By not giving a reactive response, they have nothing to feed on. And when they're not feeding, they're not surviving. Well, what's not surviving? The fear. There's an old Native American saying, Grandpa tells his son, there's two wolves inside of you. One is loving and caring, and one is hungry and angry and mean, and they're fighting. And the young boy says, well, which one's gonna win? And the grandfather says, the one that you feed. The one that you feed. So you have to not feed the aggression, the fears, and the anxieties. You have to not feed it. You have to be the meek. You have to take that space. And when someone smacks you, you turn the other cheek and remain meek. And somebody asked me the question, and one of the things, I'm sure, Jeshua wasn't saying, let people run over top of you. The thing that I'm saying is they won't run over top of you if you don't feed them. If you don't feed them the escalation and the aggression back, they won't run over top of you. It's actually more powerful to be meek. As I said before, Gandhi beat the British Empire by fasting, by nonviolence. The meek. But you can take this into your everyday experience. You can take this into every moment. My son fell down when he was a child and started wailing, crying. And I knew just because of the way he fell that it was more upset and a training that he was hurt. And I knew that he really wasn't. I could tell that he was, it might have, jarred him, it might have scared him, but I could tell he wasn't really hurt. And he was really going crazy crying. I go, hold on, wait. And he stopped crying. I said, it doesn't hurt. He goes, yes, it does. I said, no, wait. But it doesn't. And he stopped crying. Right? Because he was in a reactive phase. He was in that space of thinking he had to react that way. And when in reality, it might have jarred him. It might have hurt for a second, but it wasn't continuing. He wasn't escalating and carrying. He was escalating and carrying that forward. Whereas I said, no, it's not true. And he was like, oh. And once he took the truth of it, he stopped crying. Once he took the truth of it and realized I wasn't going to feed with him the holding and loving, and which was the most loving thing I could do. You have to let them understand their own power. My son, before he was able to speak, my wife and I taught him sign language. It was the most powerful thing we could have done. We didn't have the terrible twos, because all the terrible twos are is a lack of communication. But when you give a baby sign, and they're using sign language, and they're telling you that they're hungry, and they're telling you they want something, and they're telling you these things with actual signs, they're communicating. So when the twos come, they already know how to communicate. And as they start to learn words, their sign language fades away and gets replaced by the words. But it's the reactive nature that creates the terrible twos. It's the aggression and the fears and the frustrations of the experience that does that. And the meek inherit the earth. The ones who realize that I don't have to be reactive. I don't have to escalate the aggression. I don't have to be in a space whereby I'm part of the problem. I can literally step aside from the aggression, the anxiety. Someone smacks me on the cheek. I can turn the other cheek. You know, remember the story of Gandhi's followers going to the factory? And they just kept walking up, and they just kept getting beat to the ground. And by the British Empire with their sticks were beating them to the ground, and they were just walking. They weren't fighting back. They just kept coming. And the world turned against Britain that day. The world turned against the British Empire that day because the aggressors kept being aggressive and fearful, and the meek inherited India. So think about that as you're going through your life. This comes down to your present moment. You know, I've given you examples of giant nations being saved and retaken by the meek. I've given you examples of my meekness stopping arguments. I've given you examples of being the meek and the positive outcome from being the meek. Being the meek is not being walked over. Being the meek is the most powerful thing you can do because you're shutting down the fear and anxiety. You're shutting down the response by not escalating, by not going to that next place. And then what happens? You inherit the earth. And in that statement, what that is, you inherit the loving space. You inherit the place of meekness, because we don't want aggressive, painful, dangerous place to live. We want a place of meekness. We want a place of calm, serene. That's meek. Have a great day, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.